When Aladdin and The Lion King were originally released in the 90s, they were tag-along video games for the animated movies. Over 20 years later, both come back in a bundled package to celebrate the release of the live-action remakes. Let's see just how well these classics have aged and who exactly this special bundle is for. This review is going to be stylized a bit differently since we're tackling multiple games and different variations of each game. Presumably you already know the story of Aladdin and The Lion King, and if you don't, then go watch the animated movies, they're timeless classics. Anyway, this collection features both Aladdin and The Lion King, both across multiple different consoles. Aladdin, for example, has the Sega Genesis version, a new Final Cut version, the Japanese version, and a demo used to showcase the game at trade shows. There's an additional handheld version of the Game Boy, both with and without color. It's a bit of a bummer to not see the Super Nintendo version be included in this section, especially since The Lion King features both Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. Aladdin, though, seems to still have gotten the better end of the deal. Besides having the classic Genesis version, the new Final Cut release is an updated version that adds some fixes that the original developers would have loved to add given the time. Playing through both the Genesis original and the Final Cut, I noticed that the camera tracking was significantly smoother. It's so much less disorientating while playing, and the hit detection is miles ahead of the original. On the opposite of that is the demo version, and unfinished 3 levels that were used to show off Aladdin before it came out. Think of it as the E3 demo if there was one. Of course, the game wasn't done in this state, but it was an incredibly fascinating look to see what was cut and thought of on the cutting room floor. There's even sprites in the gameplay that aren't even colored yet. Imagine playing a video game currently at E3 where the polygons aren't done yet. On the Lion King side, there are both Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo versions along with the Japanese version, which really is just identical to the other versions. No Final Cut or demo versions here. Playing both the Genesis and Super Nintendo versions shows the differences in the hardware for that time. Super Nintendo featured more saturated colors and a lively soundtrack, while the Genesis offered a darker but sharper look. On top of the console versions is the Game Boy version that can be played in either black and white or in color. As for how well the games have aged, well, they're both pretty tough platformers. Aladdin feels more like a bearable experience, feeling more forgiving than Lion King. You control Aladdin throughout the events of the movie with the ability to jump, run, throw apples, and swing his sword. It's a basic platformer, but one that does a great job at capturing the aesthetics of the movie, but more of an average attempt at some decent platforming. Hit detection in the camera is still a bit wonky, though that's improved in the Final Cut version. I do wish that The Lion King had gotten the same treatment, because that's leaps and bounds more brutal than Aladdin. Luckily, both Aladdin and Lion King have added some new features to make them more approachable to gamers for the modern age. For example, a rewind button mapped to the shoulder button lets you rewind gameplay at just about any point. Each playthrough also has a single save state to let you pause and continue your progress at another time. Other accessibility options include changing the difficulty, toggling invincibility, and choosing which level to start on, though you will lose on in-game achievements when that's active. There's also a handful of visual options to change up the look of each game. 3 different screen sizes offer a sharp, full screen, or stretched out view of the gameplay. If it's not stretched out, then you can add a unique border to go around the gameplay. A selection of filters make the gameplay look like it's being played on an LCD or a monitor. I preferred to play without a filter for a more authentic feel to the art. Playing with a Nintendo Switch Lite felt like the perfect platform for the collection. Having the gameplay go full screen yet still be so pocketable felt like a match made in heaven. Outside of the games is the museum content featuring developer interviews, concept art, and the soundtrack for the main console releases of both games. There's plenty to dive into here regardless if you have an emotional attachment to the original games or not. While I personally wasn't too into these games as a kid, as an adult I found the art and the videos to be incredibly interesting to watch. The retro renditions of the famous Disney songs weren't that bad either. Overall, Lion King and Aladdin on consoles have aged decently well. It's more of an appreciation of the art and the nostalgia rather than the actual gameplay though. These are still incredibly difficult platformers, and that's partially to the level design and the odd precision platforming that isn't always precise. The accessibility options make them much more playable in 2019, and with the behind the scene videos, it's a bit more understanding as to why these games turned out the way they did. So who exactly is Disney Classic Games for? Well, for anyone that had the close nostalgia connection to the original games during the 90s. For $30, it's a bit of a steep price for some old releases bundled together, but some love and effort was put into this. The collection of developer interviews, concept art, and the animation to game process is a fun deep dive even as someone that doesn't have a deep connection to these games. There's noticeable closer attention put on Aladdin over Lion King here, with all the new interviews being done for Aladdin while the Lion King dev videos are from the 90s. The Final Cut release of Aladdin is the most apparent example of this, but it also goes to show that this is way more than just a bunch of ROMs on a disc.